Hi, this is Lou Covey, U.S. editor for Cyber Protection Magazine, and today we're doing something a little bit different. Normally I'm doing audio podcasts, but this time we decided to do video. Simply because the interview in question had some interesting demonstrations that needed to have a visual component to it, and so we're doing video. The name of the company is Fletch, also known as Fletch.ai, and they have an interesting twofer product that will be described in this presentation. One of them is for companies that can afford a significant cybersecurity budget, and one is for companies, small to medium businesses, even individuals who can't. It's something I'm thinking about actually putting into my home network so I can better monitor what my family is doing on the network. But the CEO is Grant Wernick, and his claim to fame is being able to swipe left or right on your cell phone, and you know what that's for. We get into that a little bit, and he's joined by Darian Kindland, who is the Vice President of Technology for the company, and Dena Najad, Vice President of Marketing. In this world, we need to understand more about cybersecurity. And we need to get that down to the granular level to most of us who may or may not know anything about security and are kind of concerned about it. So this is an interesting product. I pay attention to it. It's a little bit long, about 30 minutes, but I think you'll find something valuable in it. Thank you. All right. So what do you got for me today?
I got a lot for you, actually. Where to start? Well, I introduced myself already. I'm Grant. I'm the CEO of Fletch. I've been in tech since longer than I can remember, programming from a very young age. About 5 years ago, I got into cybersecurity with Darian, who's CEO over here.
Okay.
And I've built a lot of interfaces, natural language search, machine learning. That's my background. And about 5 years ago, I'm like, well, what really needs help? Where is technology falling short? And we had come from consumer, where myself and my co-founder had invented new ways for people to interact with mobile devices. So if you ever swiped right, I invented all the IP on swipe right. It became a dating app, but before it was a dating app, the stuff I did. And
so you're that horrible person.
Horrible. Although it was a great way for machines to learn from human interactions, because you could really understand with a flick, as opposed to swiping up and how long they stayed on a screen. With a flick, it was very obvious.
Okay.
So I thought a lot about, like, okay, in cybersecurity, there's a lot of data, but the problem is data analytics or security analytics is something only the largest companies can really do. And Darian and I started servicing the largest companies. Splunk's an investor in us, and we started working with them at what we created a company called Insight Engines. You could use natural language to search Splunk. Instead of writing the esoteric Splunk search queries, which, if you're familiar with Splunk, do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
You could just say, like, hey, show me network traffic to Russia today and compare it to the last 30 days. And folks like the government and folks at big banks and stuff were really liking that stuff. But about 2.5 years ago, Darian and I turned to each other, and our board member, Eric Swan, who created Splunk, we're like, this will move the needle for the high enterprise, but that's what security's been. The top of the channel is who's been able to do this stuff. But our observation is nobody can set this stuff up. Nobody can maintain it. A lot of this stuff is shelfware. They buy great products, like a lot of the endpoint products, like Crowdstrike and Sentinel-1. These are great products, but they don't actually get to really grab the analytics out of it, because for the majority of teams, it's an army of zero. Because it's an IT person who's partially tasked with security. And in a world where we all just went through a ton of technical transformation, and you have the government telling us, like, do this and do that, and all the things coming out of the administration right now. And in a world where COVID hit, and now everybody's like, well, now I'm a tech company. I really wasn't before. You need products that can come in for the rest of us. And so we took our attitude of, okay, this thing has to be different. This thing needs to be self-serve. This thing needs to do all the data plumbing for people. And it needs to answer their hard problems. So changing security analytics, like what you have with the SIM today and that kind of stuff, from a DIY kit to ready to go solutions. And so what we're about to show you is our first handful of solutions, our first two. I think we only have time to show you one, but picture flipping the model from DIY kit and builder to like an app store. And
Okay, which one do you want to show me?
we're going to show you trending threats because it's a lot of heavy lifting. It's something that many teams occupy hours and days of their time. It's part of Darian's dream since his early days at MITRE and building all the threat for FireEye. This, hey, all the threats are going on in threat intelligence. Hey, this is actually my data. Putting these things together, even the SIMs do a very bad job of doing putting this together unless you create a lot of custom stuff. And so it's a lot of manual labor. Well, what if it takes you 10 minutes to connect your endpoint data and your vulnerability data, and we're constantly combing the news for you, and the next morning you get an email that lets you know, like, hey, these are the top things that are talked about in the news today. Are you impacted or not?
Okay.
And if you are,
just so, are you familiar with our publication at all?
I'm familiar with some of the things you've done, but if you want me to cater to anything in particular,
Well, the thing is that what our focus is not on the big corporations that can afford all kinds of tools and services, but on the 90% of the market that can't afford it. And when I took a look at your news release talking about companies that have CrowdStrike, Carbon Black, Qualys, and Tenable, most of our readers can't afford those things. So you know, if we can go ahead and talk about that.
yeah.
But I'm just saying it's not going to reach the majority of our audience because they don't have those kind of services. So this particular product would be of no use to them.
Oh,
however, I am working on another story about how 3 out of 5 attacks on an organization usually come from within. So,
insider threat would be more interesting.
so having an insider risk report, essentially putting spyware on your company's, on your employees' machines, is probably a better choice for the people that read our publication.
Darian, I know Naveen's in the middle of recalculating. I was on the call earlier this morning on the risk score side of things, but I think there's enough there we could show. And I think it'd be really fun. So the products we started with are those products you just mentioned, right? Because those are the kind of the middle layer. Those are the companies about 500 people. And so if you think about what we're doing is we're targeting about 1,000 people down. And we know that the lower, smaller businesses that cannot afford the products you just mentioned. So we're making connections to Microsoft Defender this quarter.
Okay.
Which a lot of them can afford Microsoft Defender, right?
Yeah.
Because they're just buying it with Microsoft. And we also know that a lot of them can afford some of the lower end bone scanners. So we're doing that as well. Mm-hmm. So we can cater to more of the market with the solution we're talking about. We're also starting with free, which is a huge shift, because the products you're about to see, like we're going to go into insider risk. It's a UBA-like product, and those things cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, even just to set up.
Yeah.
And we're going to democratize that in ways nobody's ever seen.
That's why I was kind of interested in it, because if you're going to work with the companies that can afford CrowdStrike, then telling them that they're going to get this for free is a better sell than to someone who can't afford CrowdStrike and can't connect it.
No, they can't connect it. And so you're actually seeing CrowdStrike's not doing a very good job moving down market. SentinelOne's kind of doing a good job.
Nobody is doing a good job moving down market.
Right, because,
like Willie Sutton said, the money, you go where the money is. And when Oracle will buy any product labeled cybersecurity, at least one license so they can test it out, and then you can say that Oracle is one of your customers, that's just basic marketing. But if you can't tell people that there are 100 people that have small to medium businesses, and they don't have you because they can't afford you, then it's not a good marketing look.
So I'll shift the narrative here to explaining the insider risk, and then Darian will get the demo set up for that.
Okay.
We've been demoing trending threats just because it's really magical in a lot of ways. but insider risk, I think is just as magical, if not more so, if you understand that area, which you do. So your number one issue in pretty much every company, and your greatest asset are your people. I think Dan is amazing. I think Darian's amazing. But actually looking at their behaviors and saying, is this Dana or is this not Dana, is not something I have time for or anybody on my team has time for.
Okay.
We're a team of 30 people. And if I was able just to connect G Suite or Okta 365, my Salesforce very soon here, my Workday, things like that, and I can instantly see like, this is Dana's normal behavior, and this is how Dana looks today. And not doing anything super crazy. I'm not trying to run it through any super advanced ML algorithms. I'm not trying to bombard people with alerts. Instead, what we've done, we're all based on natural language searches. And that's what makes it so we can build content so fast. And so we can work with experts like you on dreaming up ideas. And you'll see some of that in a few minutes. And so if I could ask, let's say 18 of the most obvious questions, where is Lou logged in from today? Is this where he usually logs in from? What systems has he touched? What files has he touched? Who has he communicated with? Go down the list of the normal who, what, when, where that you'd want to know about somebody's behavior to say it's them. A lot of that information exists in your G Suite or your 365, because that's your portal into your world. For most of these companies that are 100 people or less, especially. Right. But even bigger companies, it's still the portal into the world. And today, if you look at user behavior solutions, it's like, we need to pull in tons of data. We need months of training. It's very manual. We need to make sure you guys spin up some very large AWS instances for machine learning. Okay, we need to send 2 people out to you to work with you and do PS. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so the weakest link in your greatest asset is something people just like have to say like, well, I can't figure that stuff out. And when the leading cause of ransomware or the leading cause of any kind of malware or cyber threat is either carelessness, somebody actually doing something because they're paid off by somebody else, corporate espionage, or somebody who got Darian's credentials and made their way through. And the leading way they do this is through slow and go. You've definitely heard that term, right?
No, I actually haven't.
Okay, good. Most people haven't. So slow and go is the way bad guys really do things. Bad guys don't come in today and say, hey, I'm going to take over Lou's account in the next 15 minutes. He's done. And I'm in and out, and now their servers are shut down. That's too hard to navigate people's infrastructure that way. Mm-hmm. They come in, they pretend to be you. They then create another account. They then use that account. They probably create another account. And then they start looking at some files. They stop looking at some files. And over time, about a week to a month, slow and go, they've now created what they need to do to get in. That's what we're doing with the Fletch solution. We're asking these 18 behaviors, the 18 questions every day for you. Mm-hmm. And we're trending the last 30 days. And then we're giving you the last 7 days of data and saying, this is Lou's normal pattern. This is where he is today on this behavior. This is Lou's normal pattern. This is where he is today on this behavior. And if enough of these things go off and they correlate, we'll tell you this really doesn't look like Lou. That's the risk scoring. The risk scoring is being reworked right now. So you're going to be seeing some like processing things right there, but we'll open it up and show you the various things that go into the risk score. Somebody with your background will totally understand what I'm going to show you in a second. Does that make sense? Yeah. Kind of cool. Different questions?
It sounds good. I mean, I'm an AT&T client. Okay. Had been Comcast for a long time, and I just got tired of their service. And since the only other option is AT&T in my area, I went with AT&T. And one of the things I like about them is they've got a security feature that will tell me if I have logged in from anywhere else that I normally have, every time I do it. Yeah, and it says you have logged in. You're showing you've logged in at Pete's Coffee in downtown Redwood City. I went, yep, that's where I am. So I really like that. I also like the fact that it tells me when my wife has been doing her shopping and has come across a site that is kind of hinky. and that they have blocked access to that site. It frustrates the hell out of her, but actually I know that it's keeping her from infecting our own network. So I think those are valuable tools. And based on what you've told me, you're not actually spying on what your employees are doing. You're not looking at their content. You're not listening to their conversations. You're just looking at where they are.
Yeah. So that's actually a really big distinction about what Fletch does. We don't go index their G Suite files. We index the names of them, who you've done things with on them, who you've shared them with, that kind of stuff. It's the metadata around it, because our job is not to go be a spy for your company and be Big Brother. Our job is just to create a macro picture. Is this grant or not grant? It's exactly what you just said. And so much of the UBA stuff is drawing in every little last bit of interest about somebody. It really is only something Bank of America can deploy and do. And they do it. And they do it well, but they have a team of 20 just doing that stuff, or even more. So all you have to do, and I can go into this if you want, all you have to do is connect G Suite or 365. About 10 minutes to generate the right API code. Even my admin can do it. We made it super, super easy to do that. So non-technical person can walk through documentation, about a page of blog post, generate an API key, and put that API key in. As soon as that API key goes in, you can open it up, Darian. As soon as the API key comes in, we start indexing and we start backfilling. So with Google, we can backfill how many days can we backfill right away, Darian?
About 7 days.
So 7 days, we can start building baselines. In 24 hours, we can build 7-day baselines, and then they keep growing from there on out. And so they get smarter and smarter and smarter until they hit a 30-day window, which now creates a really good threshold for somebody's behavior. If people wanted more, they'd switch to the future paid solutions. But I think for something we're going to give away for free, to get people started, this should be mind-blowing, and it's way beyond what anybody would ever expect for free. And so Darian, what are you just going into showing the help? Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yep.
So we could go into connecting G Suite, but I'd rather he just sees it. And so Darian and his team have now taken the different types of behavior that matter, like I was just talking about, and they've built what we call boards. Think of these as blog posts inside of this iPhone app. And these blog posts are like looking at your data in context with a narrative. And so each one of these is like, hey, this is a board about user location. This is a board around role and policy usage. This is their time of day, everything I just told you. And it all rolls up to this thing on the left, which is the overview. The overview is where most people spend their time and where they come in from emails that are delivered to them once a week to let them know how their population is doing, if people are who they say they are. Go ahead, Darian.
Yeah. So as Grant alluded to, we're effectively pulling and doing behavioral analysis across all of the users that pertain to the Google workspace that you've onboarded data for, or in the case of Microsoft, it would be Azure or 365 environments that you've onboarded. And we're looking for evidence of abnormal activity across these 4 different behavior types. And as we kind of mentioned, it's never really just one type of behavior that ends up being high risk. It's usually a combination of factors. So to provide a little bit more color around what each of these behavior types include, you can think of it as usage frequency covering activity around excessive sharing or excessive access to data within a set of cloud apps. Users that maybe are accessing more than they normally would to do their job previously. In terms of usage location, we're looking at where people are accessing cloud apps from, what locations are they coming in from? Is it brand new countries, brand new cities, perhaps through a brand new VPN, perhaps? And then the third area is focused around users that have additional permissions to create sub-accounts or additional roles, or grant access to others to be able to do their job. generally speaking, we see evidence of abuse related to users that have trusted access or elevated access to these cloud apps. And then the last one is focused around users that are accessing cloud apps outside of their normal core working hours. And that's very difficult, especially in the days of, the pandemic and everyone working from home. Perhaps you've got teams that are working from multiple time zones. But we're able to profile what a user's core working hours are and then start to surface outlier activity outside of those core working hours. So
okay, that's a real key feature as far as I'm concerned, because work from home has created an incredible amount of security problems.
Right, exactly.
That's a major selling point as far as I'm concerned.
That's great.
So Darian, to interrupt really quickly, this goes back to natural language and doing searches like, okay, most people could say like, here's normal business hours, 9 to 5. But with natural language, we can ask questions like, this is Lou's normal hours based on what he's done. And so then creating what looks like, you usually work the midnight shift. I usually work the day shift, or maybe I pop in 3 or 4 times a day, and that's normal in this remote world. If we have more time, I'd love to explain more about the how, but only if you're interested. It's probably not interesting to your readers, but may interest you a lot.
Lou, this was the biggest ask when we went through R&D, and now the customers that are using this was that none of this makes sense unless it's on the individual level basis, and all the solutions out there like just aggregate a bunch of information, or they make the company set normal hours, which in the world of today, none of that is applicable anymore. And you have to look at people based on their own behaviors and define what's normal and go off of it. So we built a lot of this based on what people were telling us was not working. And so this being able to do comparison to yourself, to your past self, was something that we had never seen before, and which is what we built here.
Right. To kind of illustrate the point a little bit, a lot of commercial UBA products in the market today try to do cohort analysis. Hey, you're a sales guy, you're in the sales team, you're in the sales department. Oh, you're acting really odd compared to other people on your team. Well, that's because you're located in a brand new part of the world with a different work pattern than your teammates. So because of that, we don't try to do comparisons across people in departments or groups or functional teams. Instead, we compare historical behavior and historical activity on a per user basis. So what we're looking at is almost like a trailing 30-day window of what has the user typically done over that time frame, and how has it changed? How has it deviated from their past behavior? And that is the extent of the behavioral analysis that, when we've talked with other customers, they find most valuable and most relevant, honestly, in this type of environment. So what
Darren, you can go into alpha. The new visualizations are there, or do they not load?
They, as well, this is still a work in product right now, so it's being updated currently.
Oh, so I think it's really interesting. I wonder if I can get them to turn it on for Lou. Let me check.
Yeah.
So based on customer feedback, we took off the risk scores that you see there where it says coming soon, because we're actually adding a lot over the last 4 weeks, and next week we're updating it to have the risk scores based on much more of the person's behavior versus themselves. And it's really interesting what Darian just told you. That's why it says coming soon. Go ahead, Darian.
Yeah, so what you're seeing here is kind of an overview of all the different users in your organization, and then we have a risk analysis that we perform on every user based off of the behaviors that we're looking at. And for those behaviors that were flagged for a given user, we can start to identify what was the specific operations that the user was doing over this roughly 7-day time period, which was outside of their norm. So we look at things like where they're coming from, what sort of commands are they performing, what sort of data are they interacting with, to then start to identify that outlier activity. So
in other words, if your employee is accessing Pornhub at least twice a day, it won't flag anything.
Well, if they've done so over the past 30 days, yeah, we're not going to necessarily right? So to give you an idea of how this interface has evolved, this is what we started with. The most recent version of this interface, I'll pull it in here.
There, alpha's up. You
more,
can switch over to it.
Yep. So here's an example of how we're surfacing this sort of information in a little bit easier to digest way. So every single one of these behaviors is looking at, again, what their historical range of activity was when you start to quantify it in a very easy to understand way. And then we start to identify what the outlier activity was for this past 7 days compared to what we've seen typically for this user over the past 30 days. So at a glance, we're providing an easy way for users to be able to do this sort of investigation without necessarily having to be an expert in data science, without having to be an expert in what do the logs actually mean or what they show. It's designed to be very easy for analysts to dive in and conduct investigations relatively quickly so that this doesn't end up becoming a distraction across all the other operational work that you typically see for teams that are essentially armies of one. Maybe they only have one security guy who's doing this as a part-time job, perhaps. Does that make sense, Lou?
Yeah. My first thought that came out of this is one of the biggest problems with cybersecurity is that employees have no idea what it is they're supposed to do or just how dangerous their practices are. So this could be an incredible training program. Says, look, here's an example of how you're making us less secure.
You're absolutely right.
Without coming down on them, just saying, okay, these are the things you need to look out for. I think it's a great training tool.
Darian, if you open up Andrea in or I can share my screen in Alpha, you can show Lou what our customers haven't seen yet. This is actually what's deploying next week to the customers. We're making it even easier, and we're actually moving much more towards potentially even mobile this quarter because of requests from our customer base. They're like, hey, I really don't have time for this stuff. Security is really not my main focus. I'm a company of under 100. So this is everybody in your population. And this is Andrea's on our team. This is real data. And this shows the behaviors where she's way outside the things Darian just showed you. And so you can see how at a glance, I can see we're still, as the scores get calculated for each one, you can see it's not ready yet, but that'll pop in as soon as it's ready. And you can see how Andrea fits. And at a glance, I can say, hey, Andrea, this is why you're looking weird right now. None of these really matter because it's just a little bit out. It's just a few of the behaviors. But if a lot of these matter, then we go in farther. Interesting.
That's really good.
Thanks. And then if I want to open this up, then I can actually get, I can actually see the various points over that date range. You notice the last visual Darian showed you had a calendar and that kind of stuff. Well, after hearing feedback from customers, like we can make this even easier. And we could give them a visual of this. And here's her typical range. And here's where she has. And here are the things she's actually touching. I can then click view more and I can even go deeper. And so we're making it very easy for people to go deep. And instead of them ever having to dream up the questions, if you see the search bar, this is more for us and our experts. This search bar actually isn't in the free product because they don't know what to ask.
Right.
So we ask them all for them. And then we help them with this narrative.
Yeah, the general thesis is that one of the challenges that most teams have using any sort of insider threat detection product is that vendors like to treat their technology as a black box, right? It's like, trust us, these are the alerts you should look at. And the problem that most teams have is, why is this important? What were the reasons behind it? What was the evidence that was analyzed to determine this sort of verdict? And that type of transparency is what we're trying to shoot for within this solution to make it as easy to understand and action. Because, frankly, people don't have lots of time to spend doing this sort of analysis. Most of the time, it needs to be a quick operation for a variety of reasons. And so we've designed it to be as usable and easy to understand as possible so that this sorts of analysis can be done relatively fast.
Okay. Okay, so right now this is free. How much is it going to cost when it's no longer free? Yeah.
So this goes core to our mission, and it's something I believe heavily in, and Eric Swan also believes heavily in. Splunk in the early days had a great free tier, built a great community. They still actually have a pretty decent free tier, although they're a massive enterprise. But part of our mission is to be very different forever. And so I always want to have really powerful things for free.
Okay.
I always want to have things that help change the industry. We're not going to change the industry if I start charging for this out of the box at all. We need something that you can just download, connect G Suite, and be amazed. So this will have a free tier, and the free tier will include pretty much what you saw there.
Okay.
Where it becomes a paid tier will be is like, oh, I need to do an investigation in Grant. Oh, what follow-on questions should I ask about him? And now we go into the natural language engine, and Darian can ask some natural language questions for you to show you where now you can go do an investigation into Grant. Oh, I need to go make a JIRA ticket out of this automatically with a click. That's when you start saying, okay, well, we gave you the visibility for free. Or, hey, I need to store 90, I want 90-day baselines because I really want a lot of even more precision here. That gets really expensive for us. Or, hey, I need to keep 7 years of data because of compliance reasons, because I am in the financial sector. And so if you think about those kinds of things, that's where we start creating a paid tier.
Okay, so when you reach enough penetration to reach the big guys, which you've already done in the healthcare industry that I can see,
Yeah.
then you can start charging them up the wazoo, so the rest of us can actually keep ourselves safe, which in the end actually keeps the big guys safe too, because if we get in with our bad memory sticks, then they're screwed.
You're absolutely right. That was one of our big observations from our time doing insight engines,
Okay.
where we're working with some of the massive defense folks in this world. And they have tons of suppliers. Maybe it's a mom and pop who make this very particular part, but that particular part makes the missile run. And they have no way to secure this way. Well, now they do.
Yeah. Okay. And that was Grant Wernick, Darian Kindland, and Dana Najad from Fletch. I think it's an interesting product. Give it a look. And if you have any questions or concerns, you can always write to us at Cyber Protection Magazine, or you can contact me at Footwasher Media, which is the partner company of Cyber Protection Magazine. I'd like to hear from you. That sucks. 3, 2. All right, that was Grant Wernick, Darian Kindland, and Dana Najad from Fletch. If you have questions or concerns, drop us a line at Cyber Protection Magazine, or you can find me pretty much anywhere on the internet. I will accept direct messages on LinkedIn, and I hope it gave you some good ideas about how to secure yourself. So this has been Lou Covey with Cyber Protection Magazine, signing off.